which again, it's on the internet. It's got to be true. Do you need to make $500,000 a year to be successful? This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Hey, welcome to episode 32 of the Extreme Personal Finance Show. My name is Chris. Joining me, my co-host this week, Dan Hine. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you? Doing better now.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Now it's interesting because last week you were a little under the weather.
I was under the weather when we recorded, and then about 24 hours later, I took a COVID test, and the COVID got me.
Oh no.
It got me. I was down for the count for about 4 days.
Uh,
I was useless to
that's
the world.
that's brutal. That's brutal. So did you have like a sore throat? Did you have like a fever? Like,
Sore throat a little bit Monday afternoon. Actually, it's like, oh, I kind of feel like I might not be feeling too well. And then Tuesday, like a little groggy and whatnot. Sore throat went away. And then I think I was just tired.
Yeah.
That was the main thing. I just didn't want to move. And
Well,
when I did, it was a chore. It was just
well,
like, can I just
I'm
stay where I am?
right. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I know like
Thanks.
that was I think the main thing, like I've had COVID twice now, and the main thing is like the fever. Like I just have a fever for like 4 or 5 days, and it's brutal.
Yeah, no fever for me, fortunately, but I was immobile,
Right on, right on.
basically.
Well, hey, this is going to be a interesting conversation. This was an article that you kicked over to me. I think the article that I originally read was from like CNBC, and that linked to a study conducted by Empower. You can actually, for free, you can actually get their dashboard and you can link all your accounts. You can kind of track your net worth. It does an okay job of kind of like categorizing your expenses. Um, I kind of use it instead of Mint now that Mint has gone away. Sometimes you have to like recategorize things. It does an okay job. It's really not meant to like as a budgeting tool, but you can
Right.
kind of track some expenses that way. But
Yeah, they're the
Empower,
ones that bought Personal Capital,
that's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And the interesting thing about this study, so they had this study called The Secret of Success. And basically, they kind of broke down like generationally, right? So, boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials. And they broke down, well, what is the secret of success? How do they measure success? And I want to talk through some of the things that they measure, but then they also broke out kind of like, well, what does it mean to be financially successful? And it's really interesting how the different generations have different, I don't know, different milestones, different ways that they would actually deem themselves, yeah, I'm financially successful. So I guess one of the things, there's a lot of different ways to measure success, right? How do you measure success? There's a lot of like I often question, right? A lot of things that I do. I mean, in my professional career, like personal life, like how am I going to measure that? How am I going to measure what is successful? This article kind of talks through, I guess, in broad terms, if somebody just asks you flat out, right, like, "Hey Dan, how do you measure success?" It's a pretty open conversation, right?
Well, absolutely. Well, and I think depending on the type of answer the person is looking for when they ask that question, can make the discussion either very fun or very annoying. Right?
Right.
Um, because it needs to be kind of open ended and not finite, if you will. Like I could tell you today, you know, how I would measure success or determine what it means to me, but 5 years ago it was something different, and 5 years from now it'll be something different again.
Sure.
So if it's like people sitting down having coffee, having beer, doing whatever, just like discussing it, then that could be a really fun topic. But if they're like, no, I need you to tell me what is success, so then that way I know what to go and get. And it's just like, well,
Right.
that's not a conversation we can really have, because it's going to be like, I don't know, depends. Because you need to figure that out. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, this Empower article did break down some of the things that they measured, talking about if they are successful and if they are financially successful. And one of the things that they measured to be financially successful is, are they paying bills on time? Now, to me, I don't like I wouldn't even think of that as being successful. That's just table stakes. Like, yeah, you need to be able to pay bill. Like that's like baseline. They also said that if they are on track retiring at a desired age, that's one thing that they would measure. How well, you actually enjoy your job. That's one thing that they measured. So it turns out in the study, 42% of all the participants said that they needed to actually enjoy their job to be successful, which actually kind of low. If that means that the rest of them have to just slog through something horrible, that's sad.
Right. Yeah, well, that's true. So, I mean, that by itself could be something where it's like kind of what I was talking about before. 5 years from now, your ideas could change. Where if they get a new job next year, that turns out that they really like it,
Right.
right? So then 5 years from now that they're 4 years into that job, they could have a totally different outlook because like I actually like going to my job and this
Hmm.
is fun.
Oh,
So
totally.
who knows? Success could mean being able to work as long as they want to be able to work because they really like going to their job.
Yeah, totally.
So
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting too that they have one of the things that they measured is if you owned your home, right? They would count themselves successful if they did own a home. But again, I now question, we talked about this before, I grew up with my grandparents and my parents saying, well, hey, renting is just throwing away money and like you have to own a home. And I necessarily don't really believe that now. I think that if it matches your lifestyle and you'd rather have the portability of renting and that fits you and you could definitely be successful even if you don't own a home, right?
yeah, I would say for sure. It's I feel like today much more, well, definitely more than our parents and grandparents generation, interstate and international mobility is so much easier.
Yes.
So much easier to where, say 50 years ago, the idea of, I don't know, I might go live in Mexico for a year,
Hmm.
or I might move across the country and not just move across the country, but in many cases, not have to find a job. I'll just keep doing the job I do now because I can do it remotely.
Yeah.
Or the company is large enough that I'm just going to fill a role there. Right. So being able to move um, outside of the obvious, packing up a truck and moving all your belongings and that sort of thing. But just the idea of being able to go move and live somewhere else
Right.
is much more feasible now than it was.
Sure.
So, if you were from a generation where it's like, yep, well, you live here and you grow up and you might move 2 towns over or stay within the same state or whatever, then you got to kind of think of where that mindset is coming from as far as uh, you need to own a home, and so that it's not necessarily that it was wrong, it was
Right.
perfectly accurate, just the times have changed.
Yeah, totally. There was a couple other things that Empower did measure, and people said that in order to be successful, financially successful, is that whatever they were doing provided them free time, just having free time to pursue other personal passions. So being able to have the free time, you're not working, 60 hours, 70 hours a week. You have the free time to do other things. And also, this is an interesting part. And maybe this is my angry Gen Xer, like, get off my lawn kind of thing. But a large number of these people that said that they were financially successful if they could afford to travel and entertain as much as they needed to be, right? So,
Hmm.
and that's something where I think maybe they're spending too much. Not to say they're missing too much on fun. That's not what I'm trying to say, but it'll kind of come into perspective once we talk about the main thing we wanted to kind of focus on is to be financially successful, how much someone from each of these generations thinks they have to earn. So there's a couple ways to look at this. Either how much they earn, like at their annual salary, and what their net worth should be. And I find this really interesting. So we'll start at the bottom. Let's say you're a boomer, right? So boomer, let's say, because this means that you're over 60, well, 60 to 70, right? You're over 60, you're
Older.
a
Yeah.
boomer. This study says that you need to make at least $99,000 a year to be successful.
My first thought with that is boomers think boomers need to make that because they're really retiring now.
You would think, yes, they're
Ish,
about there. Yep.
they're close. Or they think like, people in their careers need to
No,
make that.
these
So
are,
that's
yeah, respondents. So the boomers say they need $99,000 to be successful.
okay. Gotcha.
And so Gen Xers, right? So my generation, your generation. So these are people like 44, because how old are you? You're 40.
I'm 44. I'm borderline.
Okay.
I'm like the
Oh, you're a geriatric millennial.
Sure. Yeah. I'm one of them. Whatever the
Yeah.
term for it, I'm depending on which chart you look at.
Yeah. An elder millennial. Anyway, so yeah, between like 44 and 59, according to this study, it says that, well, we need $212,000 a year, which again starts in my head, just blows me away. Like
Yeah.
in my head, my entire, like, I don't know, I always thought once you make six figures, like once you got to 100K, you are like that would be you were successful. Right now, I don't know. I'd have to click through the Googles to find out what percentage of the entire earners make six figures. But yeah, that's interesting to
I
me.
think if I recall, the median is around 80-ish
Yeah.
ballpark, give or take some. But that's household income. That's not earners.
Right.
So
34% of American households make $100,000 or more. That was based
so
in,
that's of households too, though. So I mean,
right.
so that's separate earners.
That,
It's
that's
so individual earners making 100K is probably what guesstimate half that, right?
adults
20%.
18%. 18% is what Google AI just told me, 18%.
Okay.
Which again, it's on the internet. It's got to be true. So the thing is, if we start going now to millennials, believe it or not, actually it drops. So millennials feel as though they need to earn $180,000 a year to be successful. And so that is a little more realistic, but it all depends on these numbers are so inflated. It blows me away. I just don't know where these people are coming up with this numbers because dude, that was such poor grammar. Did you hear what I said there? This blows me away. These numbers are so inflated because if we get into the Gen Z thinks they need to make $587,000 a year to be successful. I don't even know what to say to that. It is so
Yeah,
unrealistic.
it's well, it's not just that it's so I want to pause and make
Yeah.
sure that and I don't think that you're saying this, but I just for any of the Gen Z or even the millennials and Gen Xers who are just like thousand or whatever the case may be is um one, that's just what this survey found. And it's kind of like it's not saying anything like, gee, Gen Z, you're out of touch and you don't know what you're talking about. It's more of like trying to understand what has happened in your lifetime, that being Gen Z. If there were a Gen Z person here, I'd be asking them, what has happened in your lifetime that has made you believe that that is the amount that you need, right?
Mhm.
Because then that's how you start to be able to have that discussion and find where the holes are, as opposed to having a Gen Z person in front and saying, well, you're wrong.
Right, right.
So it's like, and I know that's not what you're saying or implying, but just like, well, it is a bit outlandish, but it's like, okay, I want to try and start figuring out why.
Right.
How,
Exactly. And
how did they get to that point where they think
yeah,
that that's the amount?
exactly. And let's go into this a little bit too. And I think that if we back up, so the question that was actually asked was, quote, thinking about an annual salary, example, the money you earn at a job per year, and an all-in dollar amount, meaning your overall net worth. How much money would it take for you to be financially successful? Quote.
Okay.
So that's the actual question. So those people that are aged between age 12 and 27, which again is kind of crazy because, I don't even know. I mean,
Hopefully, we're there asking more 27-year-olds and fewer
yeah,
12-year-olds.
right?
If not, I have an idea of why this number is super high. But
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think I had a couple of comments on a blog post too that it's got to be just because the younger side of that demographic that just maybe not aware of what the costs of things are yet. I don't
right,
know. I don't know.
well, it could be. And I even think so. My son falls into Gen Z because he is 12.
Okay.
And he plays some video games with his friends where there's like one of them is like tycoon something 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 or whatever. But you play games and you earn money and you sell things and you build little businesses or whatnot.
Hmm.
But part of the gamification of it
Oh,
is making big numbers, right?
right.
No one looks at it and sees 500 and thinks that's a big number anymore. So it's just like,
Mm.
oh yeah, my I remember hearing him even talking like up in his room with his friends, like bought this house for $10 trillion,
Right,
and that's
right.
what this game is trying to create as normal, basically. And so if some of those respondents were on the younger side of Gen Z, then some of it, yeah, it's just they just don't have an understanding of what things cost yet because their only experience is these games that have completely unrealistic numbers just so that you'll keep clicking the buttons.
Right, right. That's interesting. I wonder if that's what skews some of the data, because I feel as though I would love somebody that's, we said this before, someone that's between the ages of 12 and 27. Hey, they want to come on a podcast, totally get it. But I think that there are these economic pressures. There's also social media pressures that make this generation believe that this is what they need, right? Because all they see on the TikTok. I mean, my daughter's the same way, right? Like she gets a lot of the stuff from TikTok. And I remember, she would be on TikTok seeing people her age, whether it's trading crypto and, buying their Teslas and their Lambos. And some of them are like makeup influencers. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to
Right.
see it. And they see these like influencers on social, these crazy, just lavish lifestyles that may be setting these expectations, right? I mean, we're talking whether they're flying private, right? They're going to these luxury, vacations to all corners of the globe. They're dining out every meal. They're leasing the latest vehicles. They're renting the best condos in upscale neighborhoods. Like it's everything that shows, well, yeah, you would need $500,000 a year to live that lifestyle. I
Sure.
wonder if that has something to do with it.
Um, I think maybe, but I do want to maybe add a distinction, but
Mhm.
a thought that so because we're old folk
Yeah.
and we call it the TikTok and things of that nature. Um, so as you were saying that, there was part of me that was remembering, well, yeah, I used to see ads for this sort of thing all the time too, even growing up. Because so back when TV had commercials, right?
Mhm.
Because you didn't just stream something and watch it all the way through. You had to every 10 minutes there was a 3-minute commercial break, right? And you're seeing people driving the cars or having the fancy whatever the ad was about, right? So in a lot of ways, it's not any different than now, except that I wonder to what extent, let's just say back in the 80s, I don't know, a Mercedes commercial, right?
Mhm.
I don't know the guy driving the Mercedes. Not only do I not know him, but I don't know what his name.
Mm.
I don't know what his name is, right?
He's just an actor
He's
driving a
he's just
Mercedes.
an actor driving Mercedes. Whereas on social media, it's Sarah so and so
Right.
or Brooke person or whomever, and you see those videos enough, and is there some part of our brain, our psychology, that
Right.
starts to identify as, I know this person,
Right.
I think this person's fun, I want to be friends with this person, and starts figuring out a way to make a connection. Sounds a little creepy to kind of say it out loud,
Right. No,
but
I believe
I
it.
wonder to
I
some
think
extent, is it because of there's that now more personal level of of who it is that's selling me the thing, as opposed to it's just some dude or lady on a commercial.
I think you're right. I think that they establish some sort of connection with that person, that influencer, that demographic. Why I want to call attention to this story and to this article is because I just feel as though believing that you need $500,000, you need a $500,000 salary to feel successful can lead to so much like poor health and because it has like such unnecessary stress. It could add to like dissatisfaction in life and your constant comparison to others.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, what's basically the opposite of success, right? Failure.
Mhm.
So if you don't achieve that thing, then you're basically saying that you're a failure, which is in no way, shape, or form healthy, right? Especially when it's an amount that most people, vast majority, like you found 18% before, but that was 18% of people who make six figures, and we're
Right.
talking about five times that.
Right. Right.
So that's easily less than 1%. So
Yeah.
99% of us are failures.
I just don't want them, and again, I'm saying them as to generalize the Gen Z, but that generation that feels as though they need, you know, to earn over $500,000 a year in a salary to then overspend just because they feel as though they have to keep up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they have to live that
Sure.
lifestyle. So now they're starting to spend money that they don't have. They're using credit cards, leases, personal loans, and it just is going to cause problems down the road. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So interesting that so you mentioned leases or debt or whatnot.
Hmm.
So I got another theory too to kind of compound on this. Not too long ago, back we've talked before about how my personal finance journey is not all that has not been all that long yet.
Hmm.
I remember, even though I didn't know anything about personal finance yet, I still liked spreadsheets. I remember drafting one out in around 2016 or whatnot. Be like, okay, very similar to the discussion we're having now. What income would I need to feel just really comfortable? Like,
Hmm.
don't need to worry about anything. And what I came up with at the time was about $250,000. Now that was not to be successful. That was to be like primo. Like
Right.
I had no worries at all. Um, but what was interesting as I'm remembering this and thinking back on it is almost to the number how I came up with that was by thinking about what the monthly payments were for all these different things that I'd like to have in my life.
Ah,
So at no point did I ever have this concept of ownership.
you just had to make the monthly
I
payment.
just had to make the monthly payment on the thing. And so now here we are, 8 years later, there's even more stuff to have monthly payments on. And just because of, inflation and whatnot, those monthly payments are higher.
Hmm.
So yeah, if I'm thinking about having a perpetual car payment, like always,
Right. And you know
and
what? And a lot of people, they think that that's just the norm.
that yeah, that there's not just this the norm, but that they're supposed
Right.
to,
Right. Right.
not that it's the norm because well, it's a struggle, and by the time I get it paid off, I gotta get another one. But even people are just like, oh yeah, my car is perfectly fine, but it's paid off, so I'm supposed to get another one.
Right.
And if you're like, well, you don't have to, you can just keep it. What? But I don't have a car payment. It's like, right.
I know.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally get it. But so, like I said, this was not that long ago when I was thinking in terms of car payments and house payments and gosh, maybe how often I wanted to go out to eat or I don't remember what all was involved, but I remember I came up with 250,000 and none of it had to do with actually owning the thing.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So
Well, so I wonder again, it's a majority of this generation that we're talking about is that the way they're looking at their expenses, right? It's
yeah,
just they need to have, whether or not they're renting, they're leasing their car, they're going out to eat, they're doing the vacations, it's just sustaining their lifestyle by
yeah.
spending
Well,
$500,000 a year. I don't know.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see where the numbers came from and actually talk with somebody that either came up with that number or came close. But if you think about it, and this isn't a judgment call, it's just a notice
Hmm.
thing. You know, I used to have racks of DVDs that were
Hmm.
mine, right? Now there isn't that. You just stream.
Right.
Even if, like it's some kind of on demand, and if it's something you don't have, you're paying $4 for it.
Right.
Whereas a lot of those movies you pay $4 by streaming, you can go to Walmart and get for $5
I will,
to have it forever, right? So,
yeah, I will say my Disney automatically renewed last month or last
oh
week.
yeah,
Yeah, it was more than what I thought it was going to be. I think it was like $143 or something for an
oh,
annual.
wow.
Now, granted, there's a lot of stuff I watch on Disney, and there's a lot of stuff. I'm a huge Marvel nerd and a huge Star Wars nerd, and there's a lot of things I'm going to watch. So I
Yeah,
find value, but I normally try to like hold off. I don't like auto renew because, like, again, we're coming up on like Black Friday, and it's like hold off on Black Friday and you can get some awesome streaming deals. Like you can earn like 40% off on like,
yeah.
Peacock or whatever. But I forgot and it auto billed my credit card and I was like feeling super like disappointed in myself. But anyway,
Well, a lot of times, maybe it's too late at this point, but a lot of times, if you call them up within a day or two, be like, I changed my mind, then they'll
dude,
just credit it back to you.
dude, speaking of which, my business credit card that I don't use anymore. Like I haven't used my business credit card in months. And so I just use my debit, right? For one of my businesses. And all of a sudden, like, so I logged in, it was like a monthly time. So I log in and I distribute funds to different accounts. If you've ever read the book Profit First, that's kind of my process. And maybe we could talk about it sometime on the podcast. I think it's brilliant. It's a great way to run your business. But anyway, so logged in, going to transfer money to, basically operating expenses, profit, my owner comp account. And I saw on US Bank, there was a thing on the top. It said, whoa, you missed a credit card payment. And I'm like, what the heck? So I go and click on my credit card and Etsy charged me like $4.17. I had like Etsy listings that renewed,
Okay.
which I didn't even know about. And I was like, wow, that was weird. And I didn't even know it was charging my credit card. So it's $4. But get this, the $4.17 charge, they charged me a $40 late fee. So I immediately called US Bank and said, "Hey, you know what? Let's just reverse that, and then I'm going to change my payment to my debit card, so this will never happen again." Like, that just blew me away. $40 on a
Wow.
$4 charge. Anyway,
That's how they get you.
that's how they get you.
It
Well, the
really
one thing
is.
that, yeah, that's right. They get you coming and going, Dan. One thing that I wanted to kind of talk about too is I think what may be, and maybe it's just like what I see on social versus what like the Gen Z see. I'm calling it the Gen Z on social.
On the TikToks. Yeah.
Yeah, on the TikToks. Because, like, for instance, I think social media can also, it skews the perception as to like what normal income levels are because you see like viral success stories and they highlight like those extreme outliers that are just super successful. And you see these influencers on social media that say, oh, I make $20,000 a month by making faceless YouTube videos, or I make $20,000 a month with my high ticket affiliate product, or I even like I sell pictures of my feet, whatever. I mean, and don't even get me started on like, yeah, if you actually wanted to open up your OnlyFans, like absolutely, you can see how some of these earners are making 10,000, $20,000 a month by doing
Yeah.
these crazy things. But that's like 0.001% of the people that are on there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was gonna say is like, I make this much money. It's like, yeah, you probably do. But how many people don't?
Right,
And how much of it is just luck of the draw? It just for some reason there's caught fire
right,
and now it's catching more fire just because they're able to make videos saying, check
right.
out this thing that I do. It's like, yeah, it's just all noise. All noise.
So, I mean, if there are some things, and I know if there were any younger people listening, probably made them like just furious, and they But rather than chasing some abstract, crazy number, right? Like I need to earn this amount. There's other meaningful things that people can do that we can focus on achieving true goals, like maybe building an emergency fund, planning for retirement, investing wisely. Like those are things that these people can do that absolutely can be, I think, can be deemed as successful, even though you're not making $500,000 a year.
Right. At that young age, one thing I would really like them to do, honestly, is not even be worried about the money side of it yet. I feel like that's one of those things that will end up taking care of itself if you really sit down, or maybe not even sit down, like go for a walk, go be outside,
Right.
and be thinking about bigger picture things, like what is it that you want to do, what do you enjoy doing, what makes you happy, what kind of people do you want to surround yourself with, what kind of impact do you want to have on, not
Mhm.
even on the world, because that's huge, right? What kind of impact do you want to have on the people you see most of the time? And start figuring those things out first. Because I think if you do that, then you'll more easily be able to, it's like, okay, well, so what does it take to be able to, I've got my best friend who I like to have coffee with on Wednesdays, every week, right? It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, what does it cost to do that? Well, $7. All right, so $35 a month,
Mhm.
give or take. It's
Right.
like, oh, okay, so now you're at $400 a year,
Right.
and be able to start then pulling out those things bigger and bigger. And then you're like, oh yeah, gee whiz, I really only do need $40,000, $70,000, whatever it is,
Right.
Um, but think about, don't start with the number,
Right.
start with your life and what is it that you're trying to do, and then work into, okay, what do the numbers need to be to support what it is that I want? Because otherwise, you're going to end up starting to want money,
Mhm.
which is in any stretch of the imagination, and lots of religions as well will be like, it's the worst thing you could do.
Right.
Don't start with the, oh, I want the money so I can do these things. Figure out what the things that you want to do, and then what does the income have to be to support it.
Actually, there was I met her at FinCon. She's got a big social media following, and we actually had a conversation online talking about there are family and friends that don't necessarily understand that they think that, like me, for instance, like, I mean, personally, like my uncle one time said something about, well, it's all you ever talk about. It's all you ever think about is money. I'm like, no, no, not at all. Like for me, it's the freedom and it's living your best life when money's not the concern. You know what I mean? Like once you get to a spot where I don't really, it's not about the money. It's about living your best life. And that's one of the things too. Like I want to mention, it is said that 59% of Americans do value happiness over wealth as a measure of success. And so, like you said, Dan, prioritize more on experiences, time with those loved ones, um, finding like job satisfaction, right? Finding a job or something that you're doing that aligns with your values and leads to greater fulfillment. That's what brings you success. And it's not just about the money and how much you earn or what your net worth has to be, right? We never even touched on this, but you had an interesting take on it. So we talked about how Gen Z felt as though they needed about $580,000 a year to be successful, but they also said that they would need about $9.5 million as their net worth to be
So net worth,
successful, which
right?
is just crazy high to me. But you validated that.
Well, so, well, I validated it, but I also shot holes in my theory at the same time. So the validation was comparing the net worth of what boomers felt they needed, which was around $1 million,
Mhm.
and then Gen Z, between 9 and 10, and the validating it coming from the thought of, well, is that the net worth needed at retirement because boomers are at retirement now, give or take. And so if they have $1 million net worth, then that's where they need to be. Someone who's Gen Z, another 37 years from now or so, your inflation, normal inflation wouldn't bring it all the way up to $9 to $10 million. But Gen Z doesn't really know normal inflation as grown-ups dealing with money. They've known 6, 7, 8, 9%. So that's what normal is to Gen Z right now, because that's what they've experienced. They haven't had as much experience with lower. So if you figured inflation at around 8 or 9%, that would take that $1 million up to about between 9 and 10, I think, at their retirement age. So it actually tracks. It's like, oh, okay, not too bad. The where I then shot the holes in that argument was, okay, but if you make 500 something $1,000 a year, by the time you're hitting retirement age, super easy to hit 9 million. Like
Right.
you're talking more in the 20s at this point, making that kind of money.
Right.
So it's just kind of like, well, okay, it's hard to see, which is why it's important, I think. And I encourage this with. Fortunately, I do work with a fair amount of people that are in their 20s
Mm-hmm.
to just be a lot more transparent about money so that they can have a better understanding of it. What is their salary? What is the salary of people around them? Because it doesn't need to be it's not a character defining number. It's just a number, right?
Right.
I've lived most of my adult life in industries where my salary is public knowledge, which for me is between military and education and, public systems. It's just like,
Right.
you want to know how much this job makes, you just Google it and boom, there it is. So for me, it's always been kind of not been that big a deal.
Right.
And I understand that it is for some, but I think starting to have those discussions and having more transparency around those numbers
Mm-hmm.
is what will help normalize that discussion of, someone thinking they needed 500 to be like, oh, you mean nobody makes that?
Right. Well,
Oh, I
it's
see.
interesting. Yeah, like the last technology company I worked at. So not the place I just retired from, but the technology company before that. I remember I was there for about 6 years, and I remember at one point I was downtown in the Minneapolis office. Somehow, somewhere, I don't know, someone from HR or what we call the people team. I think they left something in the fax machine or
All
something.
right.
It was something where it was somebody uncovered an
Fax
offer.
machine.
Yeah, really, it was seriously. They uncovered like what somebody's like offer letter was or something, and it was
Okay.
absolutely it just caused such chaos in the office. I mean,
Mm,
morale dropped, people were pissed because it was so there was such a gap of what people could get paid and you could be on the same
gotcha.
team, It was so crazy to me. Like one of the last things that I wanted to talk through before we kind of wrap up this week is one of the questions in this study from Empower talked about the question they asked was what has the biggest impact on achieving financial success?
Mm,
Well, 84% said hard work. 65% said talent. You got to be talented. 55% said it's who you know.
okay.
But the interesting thing, it said 51% said luck and circumstance has the biggest impact on achieving financial success. And to me, that just was like a gut punch to me. I feel in
What percentage was that?
51%
51%. Wow. Okay.
said that you needed luck or circumstance was an impact in achieving financial success. And why I say that is I feel as though absolutely being in the right time in the right place can help. It absolutely can help. But I also feel as though one can increase their luck, right?
Sure.
If you think it's luck that's going to get you to financial success, well, you can work hard, you can hone your talents, you can network to meet more people, you can do all of these things that would then increase your luck. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
that's the way I think about it. And so, yeah, I do feel as though being in the right place, being at the right time, there is a little bit of that, right? I mean, I was just reading reading Psychology of Money. Part of that, like one of the things they talked about in there is how sometimes there's just that outlier. There's that certain thing, and they talked about the success of Bill Gates, right? And Bill
Yeah.
Gates just happened to be in the right place at the right high school that had
He
enough
did.
money
They
to
had
get a
a
computer,
computer. Yep.
right? I mean, it was like,
Yeah. Malcolm Gladwell's book. Oh, it wasn't Outliers, I think, that talked about it. Maybe it was. But he had that one and he had Blink. That, I mean, he's got a number of them out,
mhm,
but one of them I think expanded on it a bit too. But one of his books talked about the same thing. It's just like you get this person that did all the right things, just in the wrong town,
right, right.
and it didn't have the same impact.
Yeah. So I just want to challenge or just I just am a little kind of like in awe that 51% of these um, respondents say that you need luck or circumstance to be financially successful.
Yeah, I would hope it'd be a little bit lower than that. But to your point, though, about increasing your luck with those other things, um, if you're doing the other three, right?
Yes.
Which is exactly what you're saying. You know, if you're doing the other three, that's kind of, gosh, how do I want to say it? It's I don't know. It's there's a thought there, but it's not coming to me. So, but if you're in the right place, let's come at it from a different angle. If you're networking with people and you're talented, but you're obviously very lazy and you're not willing to put in the work, doesn't matter how lucky you are, you won't last.
Hmm.
Right? Or if you work really hard and you're talented, but you don't ever go out and try to meet somebody, whether it's within the company you work at or at a networking event or even just talking with somebody at the grocery store, right? If you
Hmm.
never open up and try to make these connections, it also won't matter how hard worker you are, how talented you are.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of like those three illuminate the luck,
Hmm. Yeah, I can
you
see that.
know, and to where people's like, oh yeah, you're just lucky. It's like, so I would actually, okay, I'm beating around the bush. I should just go ahead and say it. I would disagree with you as far as saying you can increase your luck. I would
Okay.
say most of the time it isn't luck. I'm sure it exists.
Hmm.
Like if you're Bezos, right? Bezos is billionaires in general. Billionaires are billionaires because they're lucky. So luck does exist. Absolutely. The general people who are just successful, it's not because they're lucky. It's because they do work hard at a thing that they're talented in and they network,
Hmm.
which then gets them opportunities, which then people who don't work hard and have talent and network,
Do they just perceive that as luck?
they perceive that as luck, especially because a lot of times they don't see it until after the fact. It's like the overnight success that took 10 years,
Right. Right.
it's just, and I don't say this to about those people being, they just needed that little bit of encouragement, for whatever reason, they're at some point in their life where they haven't gotten their luck yet,
Hmm.
you know, so, but you just got to keep doing those other three things and eventually your luck will show up.
I love it.
So it's not trying to say that those people are bitter and are just like, you're just lucky and woe is me. No, not
Right.
that's not what I'm trying to say. But things take time, you
Right.
know, and so you do those other three things, and eventually things will work out well for you.
Right on. I love it. I think that's a great quote to end on there, Dan. Awesome. Hey, I
You
want
are
to,
welcome.
yeah, thank you, man. And thank you everyone for joining us this week. Really do appreciate it. We want to basically just offer anyone, if you want to reach out to us, go ahead and click on the show notes. You can always reach out to us and email us, and we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? And if you are or happen to know someone that is Gen Z, again, the ages of 12 to 27, that wants to talk about their relationship with money, talk about wealth, talk about maybe the job market, talk about what they feel about inflation, the price of things.
Why
Um,
I'm wrong about luck.
we'd love to hear from them. Um, Again, be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcast, share with your friends and neighbors. We really appreciate it. And again, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Like we mentioned before, we're going to pick someone from random and we're going to actually be sending out free heavy metal money t-shirts. And they're pretty rad. I had them at FinCon. Everybody loved them. They're super, super awesome. So we'll talk to you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. See ya.